What happens when one of the most talked about women in the world sits down for what should be a friendly chat and turns a late-night stage into a battleground? In just 35 seconds, a single comment would shatter the carefully crafted image of Grace and turn an interview into television history's most shocking meltdown. This is the story of how an evening that promised laughter and light conversation became something nobody in that studio would ever forget. Stephen Colbert had seen it all. Years behind the desk of one of America's most beloved late-night shows meant he'd interviewed presidents, celebrities, and everyone in between. He knew how to handle the difficult guests, the awkward silences, and the unexpected moments. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. Then the audience settled into their seats as the familiar theme music played. Stephen walked out with his signature smile and that bounce in his step that made millions of viewers tune in night after night. The applause was thunderous, as always. "Thank you. Thank you so much," Stephen said, waving to the crowd. "We have a really special show tonight. Our guest is someone who has been at the center of countless headlines, someone who has lived a life that reads like a fairy tale, and someone who has very strong opinions about, well, just about everything." The audience laughed. They had no idea what was coming. "Please welcome to the show, Meghan Markle." The applause erupted again as Meghan walked onto the stage. She was dressed impeccably, every hair in place, her smile bright and practiced. She waved to the audience as if she were greeting devoted subjects rather than a studio audience in New York City. She sat down across from Stephen, crossing her legs and smoothing out her dress with a deliberate slowness that suggested she was in no rush for anyone. "Thank you so much for having me," Meghan said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt just a touch too rehearsed. "It's great to have you here," Stephen replied warmly. "So, let's just dive right in. You've been living quite a life. How are you doing? How's everything going?" Meghan's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "Well, Stephen, I'm doing as well as anyone can do when they're constantly under attack by the media, constantly misunderstood, and constantly having to defend themselves against lies." The audience went quiet. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to. Stephen, ever the professional, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, I think a lot of people can relate to feeling misunderstood. That's kind of the human condition, right? We all feel like people don't quite get us sometimes." "No," Meghan cut him off sharply. "No, Stephen, it's not the same. You have no idea what it's like to have the entire world picking apart every single thing you do, every word you say, every outfit you wear. You sit here in your comfortable chair and make jokes, but you don't know what real scrutiny feels like." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Stephen's smile remained, but you could see him recalibrating. "I think anyone in the public eye faces scrutiny," Stephen said carefully. "It comes with the territory. I get criticized all the time. People write articles about me, tweet about me, and sometimes it's not very nice. But we signed up for this in a way, didn't we?" Meghan leaned forward, her voice taking on an edge. "Did I sign up for racism? Did I sign up for my child to be talked about like he was less than human? Did I sign up to have my entire life destroyed?" "Of course not," Stephen said, his tone gentle. "Nobody signs up for racism or cruelty. Those things are wrong, and I think most people agree with that. But I'm curious, what do you think people get wrong about you most often?" "Everything," Meghan said flatly. "They get everything wrong. They paint me as this villain, this woman who came in and destroyed a perfect family, when all I did was fall in love." "Is that a crime, Stephen? Is falling in love a crime?" "No, falling in love is definitely not a crime," Stephen said. "It's actually quite beautiful. But I think some people's concerns weren't about you falling in love. Some people felt like maybe there were traditions and protocols that are important to certain institutions, and there was some tension around that. Do you think that's fair?" Meghan's expression hardened. Traditions? You mean outdated, oppressive rules that were designed to keep people in boxes? That's what you're defending right now? I'm not defending anything, Stephen said, his voice still calm. I'm just trying to understand different perspectives. That's kind of what we do here. We talk about things from different angles. Well, maybe that's the problem, Meghan shot back. Maybe we need to stop pretending like there are two sides to everything. Some things are just wrong. Yeah, Stephen, some things are just right, and the way I was treated was wrong. The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't going the way anyone expected. Stephen took a breath. I don't think anyone here would disagree that you faced some unfair treatment. But can I ask you something? Do you think you bear any responsibility for how some things played out? Not the racism, not the cruelty, but just in terms of how certain situations were handled? Meghan's eyes flashed. Are you seriously asking me if I'm responsible for people being cruel to me? No, that's not what I'm asking, Stephen said. I'm asking if there were moments where maybe things could have been handled differently by everyone involved, including you. That's not blame. That's just acknowledging that we all play a part in our relationships and our public narratives. Unbelievable, Meghan said, shaking her head. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Even here, even on your show, I'm being told that I should take responsibility for other people's racism and cruelty. This is unbelievable. That's not what I said, Stephen replied, his patience clearly being tested. I'm trying to have an actual conversation with you, but you seem determined to misunderstand every question I ask. Maybe your questions are the problem, Meghan snapped. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Stephen looked directly at Meghan, his friendly demeanor replaced with something more serious. Meghan, I invited you here to have a conversation. A real one. Not a lecture, not a therapy session, but a conversation. That means I ask questions, and sometimes those questions might be challenging. That's my job. If you just wanted someone to sit here and agree with everything you say, you should have bought an ad spot instead of coming on a talk show. The audience gasped. Meghan's face went red. How dare you, she said quietly, her voice shaking. How dare you speak to me like that? I'm speaking to you like I speak to every guest, Stephen said firmly. With respect, but also with honesty. I don't treat you any differently because of who you are or what you've been through. You're a guest on my show, and you agreed to be interviewed. That means answering questions, even ones you might not like. Meghan stood up abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected like this. Nobody's disrespecting you, Stephen said, still seated. I'm doing my job. If you can't handle someone asking you genuine questions without getting defensive, then maybe you're not ready for this kind of conversation. You know what your problem is, Stephen, Meghan said, pointing at him. You're just like all the rest of them. You pretend to be this nice guy, this progressive voice. But when it comes down to it, you're just another person who wants to tear down a strong woman. You can't handle the fact that I won't play your game. What game? Stephen asked, genuinely confused. What game am I playing? I'm literally just trying to interview you. The game where you ask loaded questions designed to make me look bad, Meghan said. The game where you pretend to be balanced, but you're really just trying to get me to say something you can use against me. I see right through it, Stephen. I see exactly what you're doing. Stephen stood up now, his expression serious. Meghan, I think you need to take a step back and listen to yourself. I have asked you normal interview questions. The same kinds of questions I ask everyone who sits in that chair. If you interpret basic journalism as an attack, that says more about where you're at right now than it does about me. Don't you psychoanalyze me, Meghan hissed. You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. You're right. I don't, Stephen said. That's why I'm asking questions. That's literally the entire point of an interview. You share your perspective. I ask follow-up questions. We have a dialogue. But you don't want dialogue. You want a platform to monologue, and that's not what this show is. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I'm leaving. Okay, Stephen said simply. This seemed to catch Meghan off guard. That's it? You're just going to let me leave? What would you like me to do? Stephen asked. Beg you to stay? You're an adult. If you want to leave, leave. But don't act like you're being forced out. You're choosing to leave because you don't like being asked questions. No, Meghan said, her voice rising. I'm choosing to leave because you're a terrible interviewer who doesn't know how to treat people with respect. The audience gasped again. This was getting ugly. Stephen's jaw tightened. I have been nothing but respectful to you from the moment you walked on this stage. I welcomed you warmly. I asked you how you were doing, and I tried to have a real conversation with you. You're the one who came in here with an attitude, who turned every question into an attack, and who has been rude not just to me, but to this entire process. How dare you? Meghan repeated, her voice shaking with rage now. You have no idea what I deal with every single day. The pressure, the criticism, the constant attacks. And I come here thinking maybe, just maybe, I'll get a fair conversation. And instead I get this. I get you attacking me on live television. I'm not attacking you, Stephen said, his voice raised now too. I'm calling out the fact that you're being completely unreasonable. There's a difference. You know what? Meghan said, her voice dripping with venom. You're nothing but a puppet, a corporate puppet who says whatever his bosses tell him to say. You have no integrity, no backbone, and no talent. And the only reason anyone watches this show is because they're too lazy to change the channel. The audience collectively gasped. You could hear people murmuring in shock. This had crossed a line. Stephen's face went pale, then red. Get out. What? Meghan said, surprised. Get out of my studio, Stephen said, his voice deadly calm now. You don't get to come on my show. Disrespect me. Disrespect my audience. Disrespect the entire process. And then insult me personally. I tried to give you every opportunity to have a real conversation. I was patient, I was respectful, and I tried to meet you where you were. But you've shown me who you are. So leave. Now. You can't kick me off the show, Meghan said, but her voice wavered. I absolutely can, and I am, Stephen said. This is my show. My name is on it. And I decide who gets to sit in that chair. You just lost that privilege. Meghan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She clearly hadn't expected this. Fine, she finally said. Fine. I don't need this. I don't need you. I don't need any of this. You're all beneath me anyway. And there it is, Stephen said quietly. The truth finally comes out. We're all beneath you. That's what you really think, isn't it? That's why you can't handle being asked normal questions like everyone else. Because you think you're above it. Above all of us. I am above this circus, Meghan spat. I came from royalty, Stephen. Real royalty. Not this fake American entertainment nonsense. I know what real class looks like, and this isn't it. Stephen laughed, but there was no humor in it. You married into a family. You didn't earn anything. And then, when things got hard, when you actually had to follow some rules and think about something other than yourself, you ran. You quit. And now you go around acting like you're some kind of victim when really you just couldn't handle that. The world doesn't revolve around you. The audience was completely silent. This was brutal. Meghan's face was bright red now, tears forming in her eyes, but they looked more like tears of rage than sadness. You have no right to speak to me like that. No right at all. I have every right, Stephen said. You came on my show. You started this. You turned what should have been a pleasant conversation into a confrontation. You insulted me, my work, and my audience. So yeah, I have every right to tell you exactly what I think of your behavior right now. I was told this would be a friendly interview, Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. I was told you were one of the good ones. It was supposed to be friendly, Stephen said, his voice softening just slightly. I wanted it to be friendly. But you made that impossible. Every question I asked, you took as an attack. Every attempt at actual dialogue, you shut down. You came here with your mind already made up that everyone was against you, and you made that a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because everyone is against me, Meghan shouted. Can't you see that? Every single person, every single outlet, every single interview. Everyone wants to make me the villain. Well, I'm not going to play along anymore. I'm not going to sit here and let you make me into something I'm not. Nobody's making you into anything, Stephen said, exhausted now. You're doing this to yourself. Right now, in this moment, you're proving every critic right. You're showing everyone exactly who you are. Someone who can't handle the slightest pushback, who thinks everyone owes you something, and who throws a tantrum when things don't go exactly your way. Meghan grabbed her purse tighter, her knuckles white. I'm leaving, and everyone is going to hear about this. Everyone is going to know how I was treated here tonight. Good, Stephen said. Tell them. Tell them exactly what happened. That you came on a talk show, got asked normal interview questions, threw a fit, insulted everyone involved, and then stormed off when you got called out for your behavior. Please, tell everyone. I welcome it. Meghan looked like she wanted to say something else, but no words came out. She turned on her heel and started walking toward the exit. Meghan, Stephen called out. She stopped and turned around, perhaps expecting an apology. Don't forget your microphone pack, Stephen said flatly, pointing to the small device still clipped to her dress. For a moment, Meghan just stood there, humiliation washing over her face. Then she reached back, fumbled with the microphone, yanked it off with more force than necessary, and threw it on the ground. The sound of the microphone hitting the floor echoed through the silent studio. Without another word, Meghan turned and walked off the stage, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. The studio door slammed behind her with a bang that made several audience members jump. Stephen stood there for a moment, staring at the empty chair across from him. The audience didn't know what to do. Should they applaud? Should they stay silent? Was this part of the show? Finally, Stephen let out a long breath and turned to face the camera. Well, he said, running a hand through his hair. That happened. A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. I want to apologize to all of you, Stephen continued, to everyone here in the studio and everyone watching at home. That's not the show we planned for tonight. That's not the conversation I wanted to have. I genuinely invited Meghan here, hoping we could have a real discussion about her experiences, her perspective, and her life. But as you all just witnessed, that became impossible. He sat back down at his desk, looking more rattled than his audience had ever seen him. I've been doing this job for a long time, he said quietly. I've interviewed people I disagree with, people who have done terrible things, people who have made me angry. But I've always tried to maintain respect and dignity in those conversations. I tried to do that tonight. I really did. But there's only so much you can do when someone comes in determined to be offended by everything. The audience started to applaud. Softly at first, then building into strong, supportive applause. Stephen held up his hand. No, please. This isn't about taking sides or making anyone into a hero or villain. It's just sad. It's sad that we couldn't have the conversation we all wanted to have. It's sad that things escalated the way they did. And it's sad that someone is clearly in so much pain that they can't see past their own perspective long enough to actually connect with another human being. He shuffled some papers on his desk, clearly trying to regain his composure. The thing is, Stephen continued, I don't think Meghan is a bad person. I really don't. I think she's hurt. I think she's been through some genuinely difficult things. But hurt people who don't deal with their hurt end up hurting other people. And what you saw tonight was someone lashing out because they're in pain. The audience was completely focused on him now, hanging on every word. But here's the thing, Stephen said, his voice getting stronger. Being in pain doesn't give you the right to treat other people poorly. It doesn't give you a free pass to be cruel or dismissive or disrespectful. We all have struggles. Every single person in this studio, everyone watching at home, we've all been through things. We've all been hurt. But we still have to show up in the world and treat people with basic human decency. More applause erupted from the audience. I asked Meghan fair questions, Stephen said firmly. Questions I would ask anyone. Questions designed to help her tell her story in her own words. And instead of answering them, instead of engaging in actual dialogue, she decided that I was the enemy. That you were all the enemy. That everyone is the enemy except her. He paused, looking directly into the camera. And that's just not how the world works. You can't go through life thinking everyone is out to get you. You can't interpret every question as an attack. You can't build walls so high that nobody can reach you and then complain that you're isolated. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your part in how things unfold. And tonight, Meghan wasn't willing to do that. The audience gave him a standing ovation. Stephen waited for them to settle down before continuing. I want to be clear about something, he said. The criticism Meghan has faced, especially the racist attacks, those are real, and they're wrong. Nobody should have to endure that kind of hatred. But acknowledging that doesn't mean we have to pretend like every single criticism of her is invalid. It doesn't mean we have to treat her with kid gloves and never ask her challenging questions. That's not fairness. That's patronizing. He took a sip of water from the mug on his desk. I believe in treating all my guests with respect, Stephen continued. But respect is a two-way street. It requires mutual engagement, mutual listening, and mutual humanity. And tonight, despite my best efforts, that didn't happen. Not because I didn't try, but because one person in that conversation wasn't interested in having a conversation at all. She was interested in delivering a message, and anyone who didn't simply nod along was labeled an enemy. The weight of what had just happened seemed to settle over the studio. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was something deeper, something that touched on how we talk to each other, how we listen, and how we navigate disagreement. You know what the really sad part is? Stephen said softly. I think Meghan has important things to say. I think her experiences could teach us valuable lessons about racism, about institutional power, about the price of fame. But she's so wrapped up in her own narrative, so convinced that everyone is against her, that she can't get out of her own way long enough to actually communicate those things effectively. He looked at the empty chair across from him. That chair has held presidents and activists, scientists and artists, people who have changed the world, and people who are trying to change the world. And you know what they all had in common? They were willing to be questioned. They were willing to defend their ideas, explain their reasoning, and engage in actual back and forth. Because that's what adults do. That's what people who actually want to make a difference do. The studio was so quiet, you could hear people breathing. Meghan walked off the stage tonight thinking she proved something, Stephen said. Thinking she showed strength by refusing to engage. But all she proved is that she's not ready for the kind of honest dialogue that creates real change. Real strength isn't walking away when things get uncomfortable. Real strength is staying in the conversation even when it's hard. He straightened up in his chair, and you could see him physically shaking off the weight of what had happened. Anyway, he said with a tired smile, we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to try to salvage this show with some comedy, some music, and hopefully restore some joy to your evening. Because despite what just happened, life goes on. The show goes on. And we don't let one person's bad behavior define us or bring us down. The audience applauded again as they cut to commercial. Behind the scenes, production assistants scrambled to figure out what to do with the rest of the show. The segment with Meghan was supposed to take up most of the episode. Now they had a massive hole to fill, but Stephen, professional that he was, came back from commercial with renewed energy. He didn't dwell on what had happened. He didn't spend the rest of the show talking about the altercation. He simply moved forward, bringing out a surprise musical guest and delivering his monologue with the same sharp wit his audience loved. The moment with Meghan became a footnote in the evening rather than the entire story. And perhaps that was the most powerful statement of all. That her tantrum, her outburst, her dramatic exit ultimately didn't matter as much as she thought it did. The show went on without her. The audience laughed and clapped and enjoyed themselves. The world kept spinning. Because that's what happens when you think everything is about you. You miss the fact that it never was.